Non-stop nausea, vomiting and weight loss. Why wasn't Jess Cronshaw's extreme pregnancy sickness picked up before it was too late? It led to Jess taking her own life, and now her mum is demanding action. And 13 years after Princess Kate brought the sickness to worldwide attention, why are the signs still being missed? I'm Lucy Watson, and this is What You Need to Know. Well, joining me now is ITV News reporter Cari Davies to talk more about this condition, Hyperemesis gravidarum. And you have also been talking to Jess's mum about what her daughter suffered. But we should say ahead of our chat, Cari, that some of what we're going to talk about is really, really distressing. Jess died, her very tiny young baby also died too. But first of all, can you explain to me what this condition actually is? What is HG?
In simple terms, it's an extreme form of pregnancy sickness characterised by constant nausea, pretty much, very frequent vomiting, sort of 20, even 30 times a day in some cases. Like you say, it's the same condition that the Princess of Wales was hospitalised with in her pregnancies. For some women, it can also cause hypersalivating, needing to spit all the time, which is really distressing throughout pregnancy. It can give people migraines, bad headaches, fatigue. Obviously, it makes it really hard to eat, really hard to drink. That can then lead to dehydration, malnutrition, and rapid weight loss. It is debilitating. And as we've seen from content creator Em Clarkson recently, who's kind of very openly shared her experience on social media, it also has a really big psychological impact.
I feel like we've only just started to become aware of it in recent years, but really, how common is it?
Well, that's probably part of the problem, is that for a very long time, women were just told, oh, well, you know, every woman is sick in pregnancy. And so it perhaps hasn't been recognised for a long time. It's still described as rare. We're told that it's around 3% of pregnancies will be affected by it. So that's around 30,000 women in the UK every year. But of course, with any condition where it's still slightly misunderstood, there's the risk that it's underreported. And as soon as I started talking about hyperemesis gravidarum, so many people would be like, oh, my wife had that, or my cousin, or my friend. And it does feel as though there are lots of people who have either experienced it or know someone who has.
Now, I have suffered from morning sickness. I remember vividly stuffing my face with dry crackers just to be able to cope with the bus journey into work. A friend of mine, similar to me, had 2 little boys, but she was hospitalised with her morning sickness because she too had HG, it turned out. Just how does it differ from, you know, your regular morning sickness?
Yeah, well, morning sickness is a bit of a misnomer, really, because it doesn't just happen in the morning. You can be sick at any time during the day or night. And pregnancy sickness does affect around 70% of pregnancies, but it's a spectrum. It can vary from being quite mild, which eases off by the second trimester, and is what we would consider to be normal pregnancy sickness. And it can go right up to the extreme end, which is what we would describe as hyperemesis gravidarum. For it to be that extreme, it's going to be affecting your ability to function normally. Lots of women struggle to get out of bed. There's also big impacts on mental health with hyperemesis gravidarum. Sufferers are 8 times more likely to suffer from antenatal depression. Nearly 20% of women with the condition will have PTSD, and many more will say that they have been traumatised by it in some way.
And I think you know, my knowledge of it was all about the kind of the very outward signs of this condition, you know, the vomiting, the nausea, things that you associate with feeling pretty rotten. But I hadn't given this a thought about what psychological impact that can have on a mum-to-be. And that brings us on to Jess Cronshaw, and the family that you have met and talked about. What happened to Jess? Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so Jess was 26 years old when she fell pregnant. She was really excited to be a mum, her and her partner, both looking forward to having a baby. They very quickly realised that something wasn't quite right. Jess became really unwell within a few weeks of her pregnancy. She couldn't eat, she couldn't drink, she was having to stay in bed on the sofa most of the time. She had to be in the dark because the light was making her feel nauseous. She couldn't move very much because anything like that would make her feel sick. She couldn't look at her phone, really, couldn't watch television. So she was just really trapped with these symptoms. And she became unrecognisable. She was such an active, driven, fun-loving, ambitious woman. And within weeks was just completely bedridden. And she tried to explain how she was feeling in voice notes to her friends.
Honestly, it's like the hardest thing I've ever gone through in my life. Like the constant nausea, like there's no relief from it. And I just spend my days in bed and I can't, honestly, I just can't. It's just horrible.
And Cari, I mean, it's so upsetting listening to her struggling like that. What does her mum think went so terribly wrong with the care that she was getting?
Yeah, well, there was a number of failings with her care. There was really poor communication between GPs, midwives, nurses and consultants that Jess saw. Jess was visibly very thin, her mood was very low, but Susan, her mum, says that no one really picked up on that. At the inquest into Jess and Elsie's deaths in January last year, the coroner concluded that failings in Jess's care led to a deterioration in her mental health. She highlighted the fact that she was given incorrect advice to wean off the anti-sickness medication and that she'd not been referred to any mental health service or support. Jess's mum, Susan, just says that nobody really took responsibility for getting Jess the care that she needed. We can hear from her now.
That's all it would have took, one individual, professional, to do something for Jess, and it would have changed the outcome altogether. I know that, and I live with that. I wouldn't want anybody to feel how Jess felt. No one there, she felt no one was listening. And they weren't, I just know they weren't.
I mean, it's several years since Jess and baby Elsie died, and it still seems so very raw to her mum. You know, she's so upset. She lost her daughter, her granddaughter, because of these failings. You know, to be quite blunt, Cari, why do you think she wanted to talk to you about this?
I was pretty blown away, really, by her courage and the power of her words. I mean, it was clearly so hard for her to speak about it, but she was so determined to, because she just doesn't want anyone else to be in the same position that Jess was. And quite poignantly, she said if Jess were still here, she would be fighting for changes and for better care.
She said, once I've had baby, I'm going to really fight for people who've got this condition, and she would have done. I know she would. Her mental health really, obviously, deteriorated because her condition had, and it wasn't. She didn't get the right care.
Cari, how widespread is this deficiency in care?
Well, a survey that was done by the charity Pregnancy Sickness Support found that almost 60% of women rated the care from their GP as poor during their first HG pregnancy. For midwives, it was 48%, and even consultants, it was 37% of women who got to see one scored their interactions as poor. That charity hears from women struggling to access treatment and support every day. And they say that without improvements, what happened to Jess Cronshaw could very likely happen again. The charity is calling on the government to recognise HG as a form of perinatal trauma and establish specific mental health pathways for women with the condition. And what's so frustrating is that there are treatments available to women. There is no cure, but for most women with HG, if they're given the right combination of anti-sickness medication in a timely manner, they'll be able to manage their symptoms. And the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists published updated guidelines last year, which details all of this. And, you know, they've got a step-by-step guide for medical professionals, from GPs right through to A&E and to midwives. So the kind of message from people like Professor Kathy Nelson-Piercy, who's a leading consultant obstetric physician, is these just need to be followed. It's a education issue in a lot of cases.
So by us talking about this, raising awareness, that key phrase, Is that the only way to improve things for women suffering like this, to be heard, or is more being done more broadly speaking?
These women aren't feeling heard, they're not feeling validated, and that's also really crucial in the care of this condition, is that people feel like they're being listened to and they don't experience this kind of medical gaslighting that so many of them report feeling. And as we've mentioned, of course, if you're not feeling as though you're being taken seriously, despite how desperately sick you feel, that obviously is going to have a huge impact then on your mental health. Now, East Lancashire Hospital Trust, who are responsible for Jess's care, accepted the coroner's recommendations at the time and said their own internal investigation did lead to improvements. More recently, the Trust has said it's now implemented the most up-to-date guidance from the Royal College of Obstetricians and Gynaecologists, and crucially, that mental health assessments are part of routine antenatal appointments. It took a tragedy, though, for action to be taken there, and this is a problem right across the UK. I've heard from women who are still experiencing poor care in the research for this condition. Many of them are pregnant at the moment and struggling to get support. And it's not just regional, it's racial as well. Black women are more likely to have HG. They're more likely to be hospitalised when they're extremely sick. But that bit before, you know, getting that early intervention, they're just not appearing at the clinics, or they're just not accessing the treatment that's available. And so there's a lot of work to be done to try and tackle those inequalities as well. In the response to my report, NHS England said it's committed to improving care for HG nationwide. The Department of Health accepted that too many women aren't receiving the compassionate, personalised maternity care that they deserve. And they said the government is working to change that through training more midwives and more maternal mental health workers.
Now, Cari, to try and end this on a lighter, maybe more positive note, are you hopeful? Is Susan hopeful that the care can get better on this?
Yes, there is hope. You have got pockets in the UK of brilliant care. At the moment, the exact cause is still under investigation, but research has found a link between a hormone called GDF15, which occurs in everybody naturally, but it's produced in abundance by the placenta. And what they found is they think that some women are particularly sensitive to that sudden influx of that hormone, and that is what's causing this really severe reaction, nausea and vomiting. And so there's hope and trials at the moment to try and find a treatment that might tackle that sensitivity. And as I say, a lot of this is around education. It doesn't need to be something that costs a huge amount of money. And women just need kindness. They need compassion and kindness.
Cari, thanks very much for talking us through that so comprehensively. For more information about this, you can go to pregnancysicknesssupport.org.uk. And if you need someone to talk to, call Samaritans on 116 123. If you're listening to this on a podcast platform, there are links in the show notes. Until next time, thank you very much for joining us.